Am I able to be seen now? Have I arrived on the stream? Oh man, technical difficulties with Restream. I'm amazed. Just make sure we're connected here. Black Rose, if you can give me a heads up, that would be great. Then I don't have to go too crazy. Oh, Restream. I despise it because of the technical difficulties, right? Okay, good. There's sometimes I run into these issues where I every week now, because of Restream, I have to test just before we start, like before I start, and make sure everything is connected and everything is going and the internet is connected well and everything is just fine. If not, I get issues. Okay, let's go back to where I was. So tonight it's going to be about monsters. Now, this is Condor DM, the Out of Order stream. Why? Because it's not consistent. This is when I have Saturday nights free of any activities. I do an additional stream that week. So I have a core stream, the Condor DM show on Sunday nights. That's guaranteed every Sunday night. Like every Sunday night, right? I apologize again for the Restream difficulties. It's a bit embarrassing. But let's look past that. Now I get a surprise. So no worries. And the way I'm going to go through the monsters tonight, I think it's going to surprise you. I'm really going to go through the facts. It's going to be focused from a TSR point of view, why they were used, what was their purpose, what the monsters are, and they're very core to the game. They're very core to everything you do in D&D. I promise you, I picked certain monsters on purpose because it's a unique view, too, from TSR compared to, say, the Wizards of the Coast view of these monsters. Just a completely different view. Now, I got a surprise for you. I have mentioned before that I like bullywugs, and people have heard me say this more than once. Well, yeah, guess what? I've done the work on bullywugs tonight. We're going to cover bullywugs just like the other monsters. So if you've read the title, you already know Goblins, right? Bugbears, Kobolds, and bullywugs. I get a lot of material to go through. But before we get to that main material, the factual, real stuff, I have my own personal life experience from when I started in 1991. And I don't want to talk about my matured understanding of these things now or what I've learned after so many decades. I want to tell you what it was really like for me as a second edition DM, starting as a DM, how I viewed these monsters and how I personally used them. And I took some unique, some unique roads, right? Choices in the process. And it's not going to be exactly detailed here. So this is just my take, the first bit. And then we're going to go through the whole history. And I think it's going to be really worth it for you. You're really going to like it. For some of you, it will be stuff you just understand. And for others, it's going to be like, oh, wow. Like it's like good Eureka information stuff. Really factual. Oh. But let's start with the personal, right? So personal. Goblins. What was my take in 1991 on Goblins? When I think D&D and monsters, the Goblin is the first one I think of every time. When you say Dungeons and Dragons and monster, I swear Goblin pops up in my head. It's like, in my mind, it's like a mascot. I connect it so much to that monster, to Dungeons and Dragons, that it's a face, right? To me, Goblins are as much of a face of the brand, I really believe this, as the Dungeons and the Dragons, right? Like many, I use Goblins as devious little pain in the asses. I like Goblins so much that I wanted to use them at higher levels and not just in large numbers. Like, I didn't want to use them all the time where it's like, if I use them against higher level characters, I got to surplus on them because, there's limitations with Goblins. I took some different approaches to make that a reality, right? I want them to be a threat with a reasonable sized group at higher levels. So I played around with the military gimmick, and in second edition, they had a a lot of details on monsters like goblins, and they have this like military system. If you read down to the details, they have these ranks, and so you could boost the stats up. Now, if you're willing to play with that and just say there's some unique reasons why more of the guard type would be there or something there, you can start measuring out fights where these goblins can go out and maybe handle a higher level group and not have to do it where it's like 40 goblins on, like, you know what I mean, 6 guys or something, right? So I started experimenting with that. I liked doing that. I had a lot of fun with goblins because they were just so good to screw around with. And I guess you would say tell a story with to a degree. I used a thing I called goblin glue. It was a sticky oil that could be lit on fire and burn for hours. Goblins would set some traps by digging holes, filling them with the goblin glue, and the target, when it would fall into this trap, it would be covered. And of course, they're going to shoot down any form of fire they can to light you, just to burn you alive while you're stuck in this hole. You're stuck to this stuff that is going to burn you alive in the hole. That's the trap, right? So they could be a little diddly with some of their traps in this goblin glue that I sort of invented for the goblins I was using. Now, the last thing I did with goblins that made them a little dirty, I had a thing, I used rat races early on to say kobolds, goblins, and some other creatures like that. And I would have some of the tribes of goblins be what you would call, they would act like dingoes. So if you have ever studied dingoes, these wild dogs, they're very gruesome in their hunt because they go for the genitalia, right? And I said, okay, well, the kobolds, well, for reasons, they're dog-like in TSR. We'll explain that in a bit. You'll understand this. It's not exactly like WotC, right? Oh, I did too. All you had to do was be a little clever, and you don't even have to change stats, and suddenly something is just outright deadly, right? Like it's I used to say to guys at higher levels, okay, you could take down this, but like, what if it's just like a spider I roll, just something that could bite you once and just kill you? Like, oh, bang. All right. Okay, save versus death. Oh, shit, dude. So you could fight the dragon, but the little spider could kill you with one little snip. Yeah, they were always fun. I try not to make it, like, I don't want to ruin the game or overkill with them, but it just made the goblins a bit more diddly. You had to make you a bit more cautious depending on which ones you were running into, right? But these ones would go for the genitalia, which would basically, they'd only do this on the male, characters, obviously. They targeted them on purpose. And if they did damage in that area, I would just slow down the male characters, like, you know what I mean? Like, it'd be like they take a hit on their armor class if there was success on this, right? So they go for the genitalia for that reason. Now, it's another thing is cutting down that armor class so it's easier to keep digging at you afterwards, right? That was goblins to me. Simple. I never thought too much about them. Do they have towns, settlements, villages? I would just say things like, oh, they probably have like some place, like some fort or something close by. And you'd be like, well, how much do you know? Well, I read some about the goblins, but like a young guy, I'm just like using them in a way that I've seen other people just use them. There seem to be not too many rules with these creatures. And I like that freedom because in second edition, there was a lot of these terrain-specific monsters. And I really felt a lot of them would be only accessible. And it was true. It was sort of set up that way on purpose. They're only accessible in certain areas. And I like things like goblins because you could just transplant them, many of these rat race type of creatures, into like any setting, just some excuse for them to be there. In the desert, in the woods, in the mountains, they can arrive. They can arrive on the sea. They can arrive in the air. These things can arrive anywhere. And it makes them so useful in that way because every other monster, there's like limitations where these ones are just like, man, add something. And you can take these things there and they can do the job. Now, when I got the bugbears to me were what came from goblins and ogres mating. That's the joke I used to say. I used to say bugbears came from goblins and ogres mating. I never bothered honestly looking into it. They were sneaky attackers. That's the way I treated them. I would have them, for the most part, be dumb in melee, range combat. Like, so if they were like in close quarter combat, they were really dumb. Like, they could do a lot of damage, but I would purposely make a lot of bugbears just, they'd be clever throwing like the hand axe from the bush at you. They were good at ambushes. They could do the surprise. They could stay still. There were some features about that that allowed them to be patient and hit you at the right time. And that could be very deadly. These ambush attacks that bugbears are well known for, these sneak ambush attacks. I would do that, but here's where I would make them clumsy. I would make them purposely. I'd make dice rolls to see just how bad their strategy was. So they come out where it's like, instead of them like properly spreading out, maybe outnumbering someone strong, they would end up outnumbered. I purposely move guys into bad strategy positions, which would favor the characters if they had bad dice rolls. So I always treated bugbears like they were just careless warriors. Though, if they hit you, unlike some of the other guys, like if bugbears hit you, it wasn't like a goblin. Like, you could take it. Bugbear, it could end you, right? Especially early on. Bugbear is pretty strong. And so they do a lot of damage in the game, right? See, me, I would have them run into the bushes like every time and just blow up. It was a way of saying, okay, these things can overwhelm, but the one advantage characters or players could take in meeting these guys, if you could just avoid the ambush. That was your main thing with a bugbear. Avoid the ambush, you're on. There's not a lot to say about the background of bugbears. They were just big, hairy goblins to me. That's the way I treated them. That's the way I looked at them. Kobolds now were dog people. Again, we will talk more about this later because I'm going to go into the facts on that. Weak dog people at that. I would have them in a large group, like a pack of dogs. I would always give them a leader, someone with slightly better stats, right? From there, they became dangerous in battle through strategy. Basically, they would aim to damage legs and feet. That was always their main aim. Stat-wise, this would take apart a good armor class number. So it's like slowing you down and making it that you can't really escape. It's this form of attack of like this lower bite onto your legs, damage you, slow you down. As if they're hunting, though, they fight you in that mode. Once weakened by these attacks, the kobolds jump you, hoping in numbers that the damage will eliminate you. So it's like there's now more attacks hitting you because they got you down to one knee. They got you slowed down. Now they can open up on you because you can't just dodge so easily left and right. Hence, armor class is going to be dropping, like going to be getting worse as they do this damage, right? That's going to be the aim of these creatures. So it made them very dangerous in my game. These, again, dog-like creatures. Again, we'll get to the details because that will confuse people that know them to be related to dragons. They're not at this stage. TSR actually doesn't make that connection with them. And that's the point I'm going to go through. You're going to meet a different kobold because when I grew up, this is what kobolds were to me. And when I started hearing this dragon connection later on, I was like, it was so foreign to me. I still, to this day, I do not see kobolds in that way. I just don't. Okay, bullywugs. Now, my personal experience with bullywugs, I seen what I thought were pathetic monsters called bullywugs in the D&D 80s cartoon. So I seen that before I started DMing. I seen that when I was a player. So I started playing in 1987. At one point, I watched a cartoon and I seen these really poorly drawn monsters they were calling bullywugs. And I was like, yeah, they suck. I'll never use those. Like, I hope to never meet those things. They seem boring. Like, they're evil, but they look really bad. It just looked bad. I did not like the appearance. Later, when I seen an image of the bullywug in 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual, it flipped my view of them. I deleted the cartoon version out of my head, and right away, they were a cool monster. If you've ever seen the image for the bullywug in the 2nd edition Monster Manual, this thing is like this turtle with the like. It looks like something actually cool instead of pathetic or corny or just something to laugh off, especially in a fantasy world where, you're expecting to see something like this. And these things actually look cool. If you've never seen the image, you should go check it out. It's definitely a public image you can find with no problem. A simple Google search or whatever you use for a browser will get you the image, I'm pretty sure. I would have them sneak up on groups through a river. So these creatures, when I say bullywugs, I'm going to get to some of the other details with them, but really they're like these sort of frog turtle humanoids. Like they got webbing feet and all this, and they will be underwater. That's where they can survive. So when they're encountered, a lot of times it's going to be like close to like maybe a big water source or a river or something where characters are going to be coming to these locations where bullywugs could be traveling through, and they might be traveling through the river. Well, in mine, if you start hearing a weird humming, almost musical sound that seems to be coming from water, an experienced player in my game right away starts thinking, oh shit, bullywugs, right? Because if they've experienced my game, they know this can happen to them, right? They know this, that suddenly they'll hear this like tone. If you're new to it in my game, it's a wild experience because you really won't know what I'm doing. You'll hear this music, and I'm going to let you sort of start figuring out the source. You're going to see the shadows. They're going to pop up from under the water, jumping up into the air, and you're going to look up, and you're going to finally see this bullywug. What you're also going to see is he has a spear, and what he's doing is he's diving down at you with the spear. So it goes from this interesting music humming under the water to splash up in the air, stab, you die, right? So bullywugs, I made them very dangerous as enemies. Like I really made them work that way. And I just took that whole image out of the cartoon and just said, I don't like that. I like this. I like this bullywug. It's more interesting. It's the trick of innocence, like that music before the right before the psycho stab comes down, right? Now, I want to talk about an observation, just sort of an overall. I would say across TSR, monsters were tools, not lore dumps. So even though I liked some of the background for the monsters and the thing like goblins, I would just choose if I wanted to use it because, I take the limitations on terrain and consider some realism, of course, all the time. That's proper to do, right? Not cheat that system or break monsters in a certain way or bring them to places they really wouldn't be unless you have a really good reason for them to be there. So I really believed in it's not just about, the lore. It's about how they function right, how you use them. That's really what it's about. Each of these teaches a different lesson. Goblins, numbers, and moral. Bugbears, ambush, and fear. Kobolds, traps, and caution. Bullywugs, environment, and territory. TSR didn't ask what's cool. They asked what makes players learn the hard way. If you learn the hard way, you learn, right? But you learn. It's the most effective way for you to learn things about the game as you experience. Don't do this. Watch out for this. All monsters in that way become sort of a tool for not just what you're going to face in the game, but it's what it's going to teach you about the game in the process of facing, especially certain monsters. Very core monsters like goblins are very specific for a reason, and we'll get to that. So let's actually get to that. All right, goblins. Where they came from. Goblins entered Dungeons and Dragons straight out of European folklore. Malicious little humanoids, cave dwellers, night raiders. Early D&D borrows heavily from token fantasy. Of course it does. But TSR quickly makes goblins their own thing. They first appear in original Dungeons and Dragons in 1974 and are fully codified in AD&D First Edition Monster Manual in 1997. What TSR goblins are: small humanoids, tribal, cruel, cowardly, in open combat. See, you can always look at monsters, but there are some things that are effective, like the terrain and certain minor tweaks about them that I thought as a new DM was, yes, apply this. I would apply, and sometimes I would add things, I would adjust bugbears to a degree. But yes, they are cowardly in open combat. So that could be the reason, they're going to run right away. It's always up to the DM how they treat that, but that's the mindset. Organized in clans, lairs, and warrants perfect low-level dungeon fodder. Or warrants perfect low-level dungeon fodder. So if you're going into an early dungeon in a Dungeons and Dragons game, one of the most simple things you do at the early levels, one of the core monsters you're likely to meet that's going to be very useful for NDDM is a goblin. They're very basic. They again, you can apply things to them like they have poison or they don't have poison on their weapons. So you can slide them up to deal with higher levels in other ways too than the tricks I told you about earlier. There's some clever ways, but without these tricks, it's still a challenge to early level characters, and you can pack them. Not comic relief. Early TSR goblins are mean, dirty, and dangerous in numbers. They always are, right? They will surround you. They'll happily outnumber you if they can. They will look to kill you this way. And guess what? If they don't have the tricks I'm talking about at higher levels, well, you could be the 6 people that meet 40 of them. And they will, of course, surround you and start trying to stab you. Guess what? It only takes a few 20s, no matter how good an armor class is, for you to suddenly be hitting the ground, even at a higher level, even against goblins when you are outnumbered. A couple bad dice rolls, and maybe you're just not hitting. Or you're missing. You're rolling that 3. You're rolling that 2. Right? Just the fighter's not getting the swing. The goblins aren't going down right away. They get more rounds to keep trying for those 20s. Bang, 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 till you're dead. And suddenly, where you overwhelm them in stats, really maybe at an extremely higher level, the stats get overwhelmed by the numbers. And the fact that there are some things that just overwhelm the stats, like you still can roll a 20 and hit. So no matter how good your score is, you're never invincible in the game. And that game always makes sure you know that, because it's like, oh, you have the greatest armor class ever. But he rolled a 20, so you're stabbed. Okay. TSR design intent. This is going to be important stuff. Goblins exist to teach action economy. That's important. They're there to teach you action economy. Many weak enemies versus few PCs. Right? So it's learning how to measure that outright. Like that's what you're going to learn. Like how many you should put in there, how that works. Do you shove 40 in? Can characters at certain levels handle more? It is a learning tool, and goblins are the best way to do that. There's not many monsters that you could just keep running the course on to see exactly how things are going to always sort of work out. But goblins are sort of a general type of monster where their stats are similar to others in many ways. So what's going to effectively mathematically sometimes work against them will start sort of just leaning into other situations. That is my experience with learning really how to measure goblins, kobolds, small creatures like this with these numbers. They were really effective at just teaching me, okay, that's what happens with that, right? That's where you start learning. The dice can just flip numbers no matter how the stats look, right? They reinforce dungeon ecology. Guards, slaves, alliances, right? They can play all these roles in some type of, evil, dungeon area, right? They can play roles. They can think like humans. They can speak common if you want them to. They're often you'll find them as sort of like slaves or servants or just a lower rank in some type of military format with other monsters, right? Like orcs, hobgoblins. So they can frequently just bow down to a stronger monster for survival and sometimes for their own gain as well, obviously. Bugbears can be a group that they'll actually bow to, but bugbears, as a DM, I don't think I would ever make that happen because I've always questioned the intelligence of the bugbear monster, so I've never played them to the point where I think they could take over. It's why I always have them as the orcs and hobgoblins definitely can't push them around, but I don't put them in leadership roles. It will be like they're working beside the orc. That's his muscle, right? Or something like that. He won't be mistreated like other lower end soldiers, right? Maybe like goblins. By the time we hit second edition AD&D, goblins become more culturally defined, better equipment list, tribal hierarchies, often used as scouts, ambushers, and of course, cannon fodder. Still monsters, not misunderstood people. That shift comes later, not TSR. That's really important. I want to make that note to you. So at this stage, monsters are still monsters. Like goblins are still monsters. They're viewed that way by players. They're treated that way by the societies in each realm you would play in. If these monsters show up, they are considered monsters. They're spoken of that way. They're seen that way by the people, by the characters, by everybody, right? So, yes, they weren't misunderstood people. And that's something that comes around with, I would call Wizards of the Coast, right? Like that's a Wizards of the Coast gimmick where they start seeing them as people. Goblins in TSR aren't jokes in TSR. They're a pressure system. Alone, they're weak. Together, they kill parties. Right? That outnumber, 20, 20, 20, 20. Suddenly, your high-level ass is dead. And you died to goblins. Right? Like, I mean, numbers say you should smash it through. Can be flipped around on you. Okay, not done. Key adventures and appearances. So keep on the borders. Goblins are front and center. Used to teach, again, dungeon ecology, faction play, lair behavior, guards, prisoners, alliances. Early Greyhawk and generic dungeon models regularly included goblin tribes as baseline humanoid threat. So in Greyhawk, they were exactly what you expect. Like D&D treat them there in that world like these are remember, it's the dungeon. So the dungeon is one of the most core gameplay areas for a game called Dungeons and Dragons, right? And they definitely made it a major focus of the game. And what's a staple in Greyhawk in the dungeon? A goblin, right? So there's your mascot coming into play mascot, in my opinion. Okay, what TSR learned, or I would say, or why TSR leaned on goblins. Oh, sorry, there's another one. We'll get to that later. Why TSR leaned on goblins. Designers, including Gary Gygax, consistently treated goblins as a training monster, a way to punish careless play without overwhelming new characters. Goblins were meant to run, surrender, negotiate, betray, not just die. Right? So they are there. A form of role play can happen. It's not just combat. They can run, they can surrender, they can agree to talk out things with you. They can betray an agreement that you have with them. Likely they will. So understand these things can happen. You're expected as a DM to consider that with combat or enemies like this. Goblins can become so weak that they become cowardly and on their knees. There's 4 left, but they're not just going to keep fighting like it's a video game. As a DM, you got to realize that's one of the essence of these games is a form of realism where it says, yeah, you're not just doing a video game. So there has to be some realism to what is happening. And players would really call this stuff out. Like, why would he just keep doing that? You'd hear stuff like this all the time, and things didn't make sense to them, right? So that becomes really, really important. Noteworthy design philosophy. TSR goblins are supposed to be, this is the learned stuff, they're supposed to be used as alarms, retreat and regroup, call in bugbears or hobgoblins, right? They're not just meant to be the upfront fighters. Like they can ambush you, they can play dirty, but if they're working with others, they can be the alarm like, oh, they're coming. Oh no. They can call in the monsters that they are servile to, bugbears, hobgoblins. If goblins fight to the death, the DM is doing it wrong. That's TSR logic. So goblins would never just keep swinging. Oh, you finally killed the last one. If you're doing that, you're playing a video game. You're even for the formatted Dungeons and Dragons, that's still video game compared to what you're expected to do, right? And they give you these tools or these explanations to make sure you have a level of understanding of just use your common sense, but common sense realism that you can consider when you're applying this stuff. Goblins weren't filler. They were TSR's tutorial enemy. So if you wanted to learn Dungeons and Dragons, you were most likely early on going to face a goblin. It's one of the most basic things you do, and one of the most basic encounters you have as a new player playing a level 1 character in a Dungeons and Dragons game, a basic TSR game. Many of those games will start off early with a goblin encounter. Could be 1, could be 2, but they're so handy that no matter how much of a trope or how many times they're used, they just kept being used anyway. Like people still to this day, I think, even in old school to this day, that run it now, like in the OSR and stuff, a lot of them will still apply goblins right away to your early level gaming. You will encounter them almost every time because they are a staple. So that's goblins. And I have some other notes at the end too. So folklore and roots. This is Kobolds. Make sure we're on the right notes here. No, okay. Yeah. This is okay. Yes, we're on to Kobolds. Okay, here we go. Deep folklore origins. Kobolds come from a Germanic folklore. Household spirits, mind spirits, tricksters, and saboteurs. TSR leans hard into the underground trapmaker angle. Early D&D depiction, small reptilian humanoid. Dog-like in a very early art. So even though there's some description that there is some reptilian, like a lizard type of shape to it, when you see the early art for what a kobold is, it's shown as a dog-like creature. And this is, I don't think it's truly overly clarified, but in a way it is. Weak individually, but cowardly, genius tacticians. So this is where I say I have them use on numbers on you. Clip of the feet, clip of the legs, in numbers. And when they slow you down, weaken your armor class so they can take better attacks at you, they jump onto you. They outnumber you in this way. They appear in original D&D and fully in AD&D first edition. TSR kobolds identity, trap users, tunnel fighters, masters of pits, deadfalls, collapsing ceilings, and ambush corridors. So they were great dungeon, trappers. Like if you were going to fall into the pits or the deadfalls or start encountering these things, likely you're running into kobolds. Black Rose, yeah, that artwork was much debated, even up until recently in my circles. Yeah, I don't think it was overly clarified, but that's the thing. It wasn't clarified. So to say it was something in TSR, I think it was, everybody I knew treated them as small dog people. Now, I'm not kidding. I heard the description, but everybody treated them that way because it just seemed to be something that took. The image sold it, right? Yeah, the yapping. Yeah, I remember that. I heard about that. Yep. That's exactly it. Again, this is where they play into this stuff, and you're like, well, if you want them to think there's something else, I don't know. But I don't think anybody cared that we're using kobolds. They were all just used as weak dog people, like constantly. I knew that was common. Important TSR distinction. Kobolds are not dragonkin in TSR. So, again, there's no claim that it's not, but there's no claim that it is. That's 100% fact. Kobolds are not dragonkin in TSR. No draconic worship culture yet. So there's nothing to do with what you hear about them later. Nothing is described, nothing is offered, nothing exists in TSR. They fare stronger monsters and rely on preparation, not strength. So they're coming with techniques, strategies, plans. They don't think they're weak. They're not going to go there and think they can overwhelm an enemy. Oh, like so they'll snip, weaken you, and then go for it in numbers. By AD&D second edition, kobolds are more organized, more trap focused, so even more trap focused, still absolute nightmares in their home territory. If goblins teach combat, kobolds teach paranoia, right? Because again, they can be very dangerous and they have these strategies and traps and everything they can lay out for you. They become very dangerous. So again, if goblins teach you combat, kobolds teach you paranoia. Oh yeah. I love the backstory of kobolds. I actually like goblin myth more in the real world as evil spirits than I do in the Dungeons and Dragons version. In my own tabletop role playing game, I actually treat them as sort of like evil spirits, more like they are from the real world than say like D&D. The Duger, yeah, I hear that. Okay, so iconic adventures, Tomb of Horrors, indirect influence. While not kobold focused, the design mindset bleeds over. Traps are primary threat. Monsters are force multiplier. So this is what the kobolds are, right? So it's when you see when they're doing other things, these things are meant to come in and be these things, to teach you these things, and again, to be these things so you can use them in that way. They're the traps or the whatever, the pits that you have to watch out for. So when you're wondering where do they come from, there is an explanation. There is a monster designed to do exactly these things. Had the traps here. How do they just get there? Well, we have these little monsters that like to dig them up and like to set them all over the place, right? So we have a sort of weird justification for the whole thing, and they're called kobolds. Now, other monsters do this stuff, but kobolds were like specialized in traps and pits and everything else. Many early TSR dungeon crawls include kobold warrants specifically to drain resources. So this is what kobolds would do. They would drain resources, exhaust players, break marching order discipline. So remember, they're doing traps or making you use shit. They're splitting the party up. Oh, you get in this room, door, whatever, jams, or maybe you're on the other side of the pit. It's all to frustrate you, break you up, slow you down, so you can't just walk through the dungeon. You walk through the dungeon, trip, fall, what the fuck? I mean, it's to frustrate you. They can't fight you and just beat you like that. So everything they do is towards this. Again, in combat straight, they don't just go straight combat. And the setting of being in the dungeon competing with you, it won't be like hand-to-hand combat in that way, at least not right away. You're going to go through all these difficulties, and they're going to do this on purpose to slow you down, make you not want to keep going forward, right? Like just either kill you or turn you around, right? And maybe even trap you again once you turn around, so watch out. It's kobolds. Gary Gygax's influence. Gygax strongly favorite player skill over character skill. So there's a lot of things that I don't know if I'd always agree with Gary on. I always thought there's knowledge you have, but you've got to be very careful how you apply knowledge to the character. He was loose in some things, but I think he somewhat had a similar principle. You still have to find a way to bring it in through your character sometimes. But sometimes he was a little loose on that. Myself, I say I don't mind your experience, and you can apply it anyway. But here's my challenge to any player that has experience in my game, just to keep it fresh and to keep it even more challenging. Don't bring in experience and knowledge that you could not justify the character knowing or having. And make a good case as to why the new character, would have this knowledge or would have an inkling of what's going on, or give me something that makes me feel like, okay, I could buy him on the maybe, or I can buy him knowing that for this reason. I'm not against a good pitch, right? Open-minded, but you got to give it to me. I don't just like going, well, okay, you know the game, you know this, so you're going to deal with trolls with fire. Dude, no. The point is, what's the point of the first time you're experiencing a troll with as a player in a Dungeons and Dragons game? Most are going to experience where you don't know that you got to use the fire, unless you got the hint, talked to the right NPC, did the thing. Most DMs will put knowledge somewhere. If you're lucky, you pick it up, but a lot of players don't. So what happens to them? What's their first experience? In a way, you got to remind experienced players. It might not be your first time at the rodeo, but your character is no different than the first character you ever played. If you understand that, what I'm saying is, with that character, you still got to look for the information. So I should be able to still apply the troll needs to be burnt away type of thing, information somewhere. And if you fail to get it, you shouldn't just be able to go, as a player, I played another character who dealt with a troll and knows fire, so I'm going to use it. I always thought that was unjustified. No, we will put information in there. If a DM doesn't, that's on the DM. But in most challenges, there's information if you look for it. And if you just don't, that's going to be failed on you. In this case, I want to challenge players with, if you don't find it, your character gets there, and you need to come up with a way to figure this out, dude. Your character doesn't just know. So you got to work. And I hope that's challenging and interesting, but challenging, right? I'm a stickler on that stuff. Okay. Kobolds were perfect for this. Low stats, high lethality through preparation, as we talked about, the traps, everything else, the snipping. Kobolds reward caution, mapping, probing, and paranoia. So the more cautious you will be, the more you map out. And this is the kobolds are the framework for where you start getting all these, like, what do you do in a dungeon? You map it out. You probe it with the stick as the trap there, so you don't walk into it, right? Like, you walk around cautious, a bit paranoid, like, shit, what's it? You know what I mean? You're in that zone because there can be something for real right up there that will kill you. So that's a real thing. And the point is, you got to sort of, in a role-playing game, even if you don't act it all out, I, as a DM, do expect you to consider your character as a real person. I personally put this on. It's not a thing you have to do. I personally have a standard here where it's like, I always ask players, instead of worrying about if you're worried or stressed out, how about you just tell me if you think your character is? Do you think your character is as confident as you? Is your character sitting in the real world watching me run the game? Or do they think they're in a scary place with monsters trying to stick swords to them and it's terrifying? And it's just, at least consider that. And if your character's strong through that, fine. You can justify that. Go ahead and explain it. But at least have the consideration that if I say, oh, they come in, you're like, yeah, whatever. As a player, I think you would spoil your experience in a game if you do that. You got to go like, oh, yeah, my guy's shit. He's blowing up here. He's freaking out. He's stumbling, grabbing a sword or whatever. Like, it's that type of getting into the character instead of into yourself that I think makes these games very unique, right? That the character can override your own negativity if you just bother to play the character as they are. Like, you think of them as they are and try to go, how would they react? And understand they exist. It's like, I always say this. Think about your character like this. They don't know they're a character in a fantasy world. Always think of your character like that. Like, you just think of your character as someone who thinks they're in something real, and they don't have no idea that you're a player, that you're playing the character. It's as real to them as your world, this real world, is to you. And once you sort of take that in, you start going, well, how would you react to that? And you can come up with some interesting things that becomes more colorful and more relatable too. Because, once you start trying to apply reality in a way to the character, you start understanding. Like, it starts becoming easy to understand your character and develop them as something separate from you. Okay. TSR-era Kobold identity. Not dragons, not cute. Pure tunnel warfare. These were, if you're competing with the dungeon, most of the time you're competing with them. Right? even though I knew a lot of people that would use goblins and say they set up traps in areas, and I was guilty of doing that when I first started. But later on, I really turned it over to kobolds because I realized they're really the framework of the dungeon traps and that's how they develop some of this. So if you're wondering what they're doing in the basement, Gary and them developing a game, well, they're using the most basic things they've already started with the goblins, the kobolds, and giving them, well, what monster would do the traps in here? Well, this is it, right? Kobolds are why old school players poke floors with 10-foot poles. Kobolds are why old school players poke floors with 10-foot poles. Okay. Now we go to the bugbears. Bugbear time, baby. Bugbear. Based on the boogeyman. If you didn't know, bugbear of British folklore, originally a creature used to scare children. TSR turns that fair concept into a physical ambush predator. Ambush like the Predator from the Predator movie. Not an alien, just a big furry thing. First appearance, original D&D, formalized in AD&D first edition monster manual. So they appear in OD&D, but they're really put into the game fully by AD&D first edition. Closely associated with goblins from the start. So they're in the like hobgoblins, goblins, and bugbears are family. If you didn't know bugbears were related to goblins, now you know. You probably know through playing some of the Baldur's Gate 3 and seeing bugbears around or around goblins. If you're wondering why you see them, it's because they're related, not just because it's a monster that gets along with some other. Okay. What makes TSR bugbears distinct? Bigger, stronger, stealthier than goblins, obviously. Long reach, surprise bonuses, brutal melee. They are the enforcers of goblin society. So if you came up to a mixed goblin society of goblins, hobgoblins, it would include bugbears. And these are the guys that are the bouncers at the place, the guards at the door that you gotta, they're gonna stop you from just going in. Dungeon roll, because all monsters are like monsters like these early on. Remember, dungeon gameplay is important to Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeon roll, shock troops, lair guards, so they could be like guarding the fucking tomb or whatever. Leaders of goblin bands. Now, this is something I've seen some DMs do myself. I didn't do this because I altered them, but in reality, if you didn't do what I did to bugbears, you could say they were leaders of goblins, right? But I would always have, even if I would have, sometimes I'd have bugbears in charge, but not that bright, and I would have goblins actually trick them, lie to them, like just sort of mess around on their bugbear so-called enforcing leaders. Ambush specialists in tight dungeon corridors. So what they're really good at doing is in these dungeons is setting up where they're around the corner in a way that they can, you got to think that if they're specialists, you include some common sense. Like they know not to carelessly let you see their shadow just pouring out so you can see their shape stupidly, right? So on the ambush, they're going to be very clever. They're going to go above their normal intelligence when they go about ambushing, and you got to treat them as a specialist. And they're doing it in these around corners, behind the door, but they're being quiet. They'll stay in the right place instead of just by the door, right? If you open it, you just got to think of them ambush in this cycle. And once you do, you start understanding they will set themselves up to ambush. So as a DM, you might as well just be thinking that way and applying it to a degree. Only if forced by some form of mistakes they make through dice rolling or what you're doing with their actions, might they be just pushed straight into combat without some chance of ambush. But for the most part, they will always go after the ambush. By AD&D 2nd edition, bugbears are clearly defined as lazy but vicious. Sit around on their asses. Intelligent enough to plan ambushes. See, I'm a 2nd edition guy, so that might not have been so clear, the overwhelming intelligence they would have in this area. I don't know if it was verbalized that well in the earlier editions, but it makes it clear in second edition that they are exceptionally, somehow they just think above themselves when it comes to setting up ambushes. Like their instincts play better to this, so they perform better in their mind when they're thinking about it. Lonely only when fear or profit is involved, or loyal only when fear or profit is involved. So bugbears are not your friend. They're monsters. They're not humans. They can't get along with you. Like it's instinct can make them attack their own people, and they're savages in that way because they can't control it. They have an animal side, just like goblins. Like all monsters are, the way I put it like this, you got to think of TSR monsters not like humans. They're animals with their instincts overriding like animals would, but it's like having the essence or some humanoid elements. So they look like something you could get along with, but in a way, goblins are complete aliens to humans. Right? It's like, imagine if you could meet the lizard that could talk to you. Like all the animals that don't talk to us in the world, imagine they could stand up and talk to you. That's sort of what the idea. They're so alien, foreign from you, that they're not you. And so it's like saying orcs are racist or something, not understanding that they're simply a mixed bag of animal instinctive traits with some humanoid features. Like, oh, you call them evil. Oh, well, that's somehow bad. That's bigoted. Well, we're not saying they're evil in the way you think. We're saying that civilized society would classify them as evil, right? And we're not saying they would be good, because what we're saying to you is, for example, their instincts will take over. So they can never truly be civilized. Like they are animals, like the dog can just sometimes bite, right? Even a good owner can just sometimes bite. And this is what goblins are, what kobolds are, what bugbears are. They're animals more than they are anything like humans. Yeah, that was Black Rose. I 1,000,000% agree with you. That was pretty silly. It's a crime they made the bugbear turquoise and pink in the Monster Inc. Yeah. Pretty shitty. Goblins swarm you, bugbears end you. Like when they hit, man, even in the ambushes, they're getting pluses, dude. Like they are strong. They are legit strong, and the pluses, the stats show it. They get the additional bonuses because they are strong. It does not hold back on them. They can wallop you, right? Adventure usage. Bugbears rarely headline modules. Instead, they're strategic upgrades inside goblin-heavy adventures. So if you're in an adventure that really has a lot of goblins in it, you could be encountering some bugbears, or it could be improved by adding some bugbears in somewhere, or it could be optional. You could meet bugbears here or just meet goblins, right? Commonly placed as lair guards, elite troops, surprise encounters behind goblin lines. So these would be unexpected things. Again, maybe optional for the DM, maybe optional. Or just something where it's a hidden encounter, so you're not meant to even see that bugbears are even part of this thing until you get there, right? Like, oh, they're guarding the lair? Oh, wow. They have a special reach and strength beyond goblins. So, they have surprise bonuses, reach, and strength beyond the goblin. Like, they're just an overwhelming bigger threat, right? And the Monster Manual emphasizes that. Surprise bonuses. This is the ambushing stuff, right? And then they got that reach. They can just reach out. You could justify initiative on ambushes, even in melee range. I guess if you were that close, they could do that, and they would. But it's still in the ambush mode. So at that stage, I'm not going to count it as careless melee. It's still going to be the good ambush attack, and then we'll see what happens from there. Designer tone. Bugbears were mainly written to feel unfair if players were sloppy. So it's like if you were screwing around, you might run into some bugbears. And you're going to feel like, what the fuck, man? Are you serious? Because these guys are legit mean, like legit strong, legit scary, legit can end your character. Bugbears can turn a game into, I'm doing pretty well, to the meat grinder. All right, design your tone. Again, they reinforce that size matters. Surprise matters. Noise discipline matters. So there's a skill commonly used by rogues, detect noise. But if you're wondering why these things can be so important, is detect noise can be catching these ambushes, right? Like it's, you need to be listening, because if you can catch these things, because these things are brutal. Bugbears are brutal. They're brutal. If they do get the ambush on you, understand that's where combat starts for you. It's never good, right? Especially if they like 1 or 2 20s hit. We're in a bad world for the characters. It's not good. Bugbears are TSR's reminder that humanoids can hit hard. Okay. So the extra one that I promised you, bullywugs. Here we go. Bullywugs are mostly a TSR invention, inspired loosely by pulp fantasy frogmen. First appear in AD&D First Edition. What they are: frog-like humanoids, swamp and marsh dwellers, tribal, aggressive, and, well, they like to conquer a territory and rule it, and then not let you mess about in their own territory. That's where they come hunting you down. They're very aggressive with not liking people crossing onto their what they own. TSR portrayal, not comic monsters. They are xenophobic, militaristic, ruthless. They have a ruthless hierarchy. Often worship dark swamp gods or demon-like entities. So bullywugs are evil. Let's be clear. Like, their instincts make them aggressive and mean and uncaring. Like, it's just instincts that make them that way. It's like, again, this is say, what do we mean by evil in old school? We don't always mean that it has to be that the being is overall evil. They're going to be classified that way. And in many ways, the gods might treat them that way. That's why magic, protection from evil, probably works against them, because they're accepted as sort of reality that they're evil. And why are they evil? It's not in a way because you would say in their own society that you would consider them evil, right? They're just living, they're all aggressive. So it's like, I guess that's fair game, right? But that type of aggression would be uncivilized and would lead to abuse and attacks and things that a civilized society would deem as evil actions in their own society. So they'll deem these people as evil. And if these beings come to their society, what do? They attack, they kill, they do everything that the society would deem as evil. And they don't come to shake hands, right? Dungeon and wilderness roles. Swamp ambush predators. As I told you, like the swamp, the river, it's ambushes and jump out of the water. That's what I was telling you. They jump in the air, they come diving down on you with the spear. Again, just like the bugbears, these guys like to ambush, but they do it from just different, like a different environment area. Raiders against travelers in villages. Use terrain, water, mud, reeds, darkness. Right? So wherever it's cold, temperatures are dropped, or there's other reasons why temperature can be kept down, mud, water, things where they can survive so they don't die. That's where clearly this is a sort of form where the terrain isn't that limiting, because you find a lot of these elements everywhere. So bullywugs in that way can be somewhat of an exception. But this is starting to show you where terrain becomes important to a lot of monsters. It's not so held back here, but there can be a lot of monsters have very specific terrain where when you see the explanation, I sort of get it, like why you can't just play it like it's a video game or a toy. Like you have to have a good reason. I'm not saying you don't bring monsters into odd areas, but at least in the sense of, as a DM, you take it serious and go, I need a good reason for why that's there. Doesn't mean you don't use it. It just means you have a legit reason, not a throwaway one. why it's there. By AD&D 2nd edition, bullywugs become more culturally fleshed out. A strong caste system, brutal leaders, religious fanaticism, and still monsters, not humanoid in any way. It's still very hostile. So they become more religious. They're not just, oh, they might, be praying to an evil demon. They are, right? Leadership becomes brutal. So it's no longer that there are brutal monsters that you're meeting in a group. Now they have leaders that can have better stats, but these leaders, personality-wise, if you go by what it offers up, is they're going to be very brutal in their decisions. So it's harder to negotiate with them. Unlike goblins, it's harder to do that where they will be looking to be aggressive and attack you right away without words. Bullywugs don't want treasure, they want territory. So they're not so concerned with having all the gold in the world. They're concerned with, we own this land and we want to take more. Major showcase, the village of Hamlet. Bullywugs appear in the nearby swamp regions, presented as organized, militaristic, actively hostile, frequently used in Greyhawk swamp encounters. Pop culture crossover, Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, which I told you about. Bullywugs appear as a reoccurring enemy, depicted as cruel, arrogant, slavers, and raiders. This helped cement bullywugs as not the joke monsters despite the frog's appearance. Like, the appearance killed it, I would say, for years. Like, by the time I heard about bullywugs before I encountered them as a DM, they were talked about as a joke. I just got to be real with people. Like, the appearance really destroyed them no matter what was portrayed in the cartoon. And they were just annoying. You'd almost look at their cruelty like, yeah, okay, all right, these are the bad guys. Sure. It was hard to take them serious. I watched it. I as a kid, I was not bought in. TSR design goal. Bullywugs show TSR experimenting with non-dungeon threats. Territorial monsters. Wilderness dominance. They are not guarding treasure, they are guarding land. Bullywugs are not comic relief. They're swamp tyrants. And they become tyrants. They become these kings, the leaders. They become overwhelming in that way. Okay, let's go to one of my last things here. Goblins, numbers, cruelty, tribal, survival. Bugbears, fear, strength, and ambush. Kobolds, traps, preparation, psychological warfare. Bullywugs, environment, dominance, religious brutality. And that's the core of some of the monsters that built up some of the older parts of the game. Bullywugs really do become important to some other places because it is an experiment outside of the dungeon, which it's an early experiment with outside of the dungeon gameplay and focus on. But still, the kobolds, they do the traps. The ambushes are done by the bugbears, and goblins are just your common foe in many dungeons, especially early on in D&D. They were really core to the gameplay. I picked them out on purpose. I know other monsters bring similar elements and their own elements, and I didn't want to cover 50 monsters. I really wanted to look at some of the core monsters from the creation of D&D and what they were used for, what they were used during the time they were game tested, what was their purpose, like what makes the dungeon have the trap, do the thing. Kobolds become the builders of all these things that you're doing, the reason to map, the reason to poke, right? So if you weren't someone old school, now you know some of the TSR history with monsters and why and how dungeon play was so important to the game, maybe unlike some of the stuff you're doing in some of the new school stuff, right? Or if you're someone who came in like me at second edition, you might not have played dungeons as often as some of the older crowd in the hobby, right? I played a lot more early on dungeons that you would say is above surface, right? Just through the wilderness, right? Out into the ocean, on the boat. I did a lot more of that really as a player, even though I did some dungeon play before I became a DM. Hour and 7 minutes. We're at overtime, baby. That's it. Sorry for fumbling a few words, a few things there, but I think I did okay. I was really happy. I hope I communicated all that pretty well. That's the history of these monsters. They're so important to the game. And I hope it helps you when you listen to this. It helps you think about monsters, especially if you're an old school guy who's just not. Look, I don't think anybody needs advice that has experience. I don't want to be ignorant with people that, I think I'm better than you, or I need to tell you what to do. I don't think that's how this really works. I would tell an older guy, this is my experience with not taking advice as if I need to know. It's like, just like you. Yeah, I've done that for 10 years. I've done that for 15 years. And I've done it tons of times. So like you, I can feel like, hey, I don't need to be told. In many ways, I guess I'm doing it good enough. But we don't always learn from advice. That's not even, when I say I give out advice, here's what I'm really doing in my content. Just so maybe you can feel less insulted. I really don't think I need to tell you what to do. You know what you're doing. I'm being dead serious. I really don't feel like that's not my intent with that content. I don't think my ego just to say my head's this big or I'm above you. What I think is when we think and talk and brainstorm, and that's what I call what I do here, it helps you think. I'm saying words that can trigger a thought in you. It might not even be my idea that inspires anything. It could just be that you come listen to a video of mine and I say a sentence where it's your idea is what's going to be developed, not mine. There's no idea in the video that I give you that you end up taking away, but that one line makes you come up with your own thing. Good. To me, that's the brainstorming effect of thinking out loud, talking about games, and improving our own place in it by learning that way. Maybe we can still learn from ourselves in a weird way. Maybe we only need to hear somebody, maybe not somebody we don't think they're better than us, but maybe that person is going to say that line that if you just listen to it, you'll hear it and you go, shit. Oh, yeah. And you ever have those moments in life? So once you do. So once you know that's a reality, what I'm saying, what you got to do is go, maybe he's right. Maybe if I have the ego that says I don't need to hear it, maybe the purpose isn't I need to hear it because I need to hear it. Maybe it's just good to listen, because in a lot of my advice videos, if you listen to them, I hope you're entertained, but I also hope that you understand that I'm having a conversation with you. If you go listen to some of my advice videos, it's me just talking to you, man. It's just talking the game talk. And my aim is not to think I need to tell you what to do. So I never look at advice that way. And I'm old school. I always hated being accused of putting advice out there like there was some ego drive behind it to grow on here or something. I'm like, are you telling me that as somebody like in the old school that I am in, spent all the decades I had playing and game mastering, that I can't go ahead and give advice to the younger crowd coming in, like just be someone who has some wisdom and experience, share that with other people. I can't do that without being accused of being somebody who is a negative person in some way. That can't be looked upon as a good thing, that someone like me with experience is willing to share that with the new generation of people coming in. And it's, of course, Black Rose. But it's just like, I get some people out there that complain about the advice. I still hear it to this day. I don't need it. I don't watch no advice videos. I'm like, dude, that's disappointing if I hear that about my content, because I'm like, a lot of it's to entertain you, man. A lot of it, if you listen to a lot of my so-called advice videos, it's partly to entertain, help you think. And I think it does. If you go back, some of my older videos have a lot of fucking really, really well liked and everything else, because it's not just me thinking I'm telling you advice. It's me being entertaining. I'm shooting the shit with you. I'm having that casual conversation, right? So it's like, I still see it as content to a degree. I'm still producing it in the form of wanting to entertain you, So when I hear people say the reasons for not checking out that content, it just makes me so sad. Like, dude, even the experienced guys out there, a lot of it I put together to talk to you. Not that I think you need me to tell you what to do, but to talk to you. And a lot of the videos and the content for the advice is just me talking to you. Just like I did tonight. I'm not telling you something you don't know. I'm not doing that. I'm just reminding. I said it's relatable. I don't think I know more than you, but I thought it was fun. Let's bring some of this up. Let's boom, right? But a lot of people again out there, they just say, yeah, I don't need to hear about the history. I don't need to hear some advice. I'm like, well, dude, it's not just advice if the content creator is doing it right, in my opinion, on here, because you're meant to entertain people. So it's like, just, hey, why don't you give it that shot? Because it will entertain. Just, I know some people to this day that haven't checked out some videos where I'm like, God, I'll hear them talking. I'm like, man, I wish he would have just watched my thing on that. That's almost the issue that he has there, right? And you ever hear people have issues on live streams, and then you have the problem solver in a video, but yet they're on the live stream saying they do not need any advice? And you're like, well, dude, I heard your problem. My advice fixes that for you. I don't want to have the ego that you need to hear it, but I hear a lot of guys on streams that say they don't need it. Boom. It's good to have some advice served in a direct, often humorous manner, not sugar-coated, politically correct ass licking. Oh, of course. And I'm only telling you what I think. It's also good as somebody in the hobby to know why people think things. It's such, in this hobby, thinking and brainstorming and talking is, I think, part of the actual process that has to happen, not just to evolve the games, but to evolve the people that play the games. Like, we gotta see, I call it advice, but sometimes I think that's sad, because in a hobby like this, it means a nerd will take specifics and pick everything apart that you're doing, instead of taking it as this video, this so-called advice I put out, this brings up a conversation. It's important to have not just what you experience, Guy, but with other people too. And it's good if you know about it that you take part in the conversation, or consider it, or be open to it, right? Yeah. Now, I've heard some people say something about people hating people in the tabletop role-playing game hobby. I just got to tell people, I've been very honest about myself, but I don't really hate anybody. I can be really angry with people for what they do, and sometimes I feel they hate in a way that, when I use the word hate, I mean, like, I hate their action so much, I might not want to speak to somebody. So they're cut off for that reason, right? I do try my best, no matter how angry I get, to try not to just hate human beings. Unless I think you're not human. Then I don't care. But I try not to hate people. I do hear people all the time hint. They'll say things, I'll hear them. And I always wonder if they're talking about me or suggesting it's me that has an issue with them. I really don't. It's hard to have an issue with people when you're just saying for years, hey man, can you leave me alone? Yeah, okay, thank you. Like, it's hard to think you're gonna keep poking that when you're the one going, yeah, all right, dude, are you done? Are you, like, I'll poke back, like I said in a recent video where I was very honest. I'll poke back if you keep poking, but look, if you leave me alone, you don't spark that really mean side of me. It's like, okay, dude. Sometimes I'll let a lot of people have their first shot. It's like, take your first shot, I don't care. So a lot of people take their first shot at me. They'll notice I'll never ask most any tabletop role-playing game YouTuber that's talk shit about me, and just regardless if I respond to them, just ask them one basic thing: did he say anything after the first time? No, because I've always had a rule: you get one for free. You get one for free, and I'm even willing to do the second chance on the one. And forgive, but you'll get one for free sometimes in these zones. I do the one for free. One for free. Yeah, sometimes not sugarcoat it is good, because you get so many people that pick language apart because they have agendas in the hobby that you just got to sometimes shoot right through it and just tell people how it is. That was, I would say, what I did with the dungeon, but not just that. I noticed an old TSR guy recently put up a thing about Gary Gygax saying, again, about the miniature thing not being a miniature game, and that wasn't really the focus, and they moved away from that. So to this day, I always support people that use miniatures in games. Cool. Use terrain. I just no longer let them just freely say, yeah, but pure theater of the mind really doesn't work. No, the whole game is built around it. So shut the fuck up. Your thing is optional. My thing is mandatory. So if it didn't work, people wouldn't have done it for decades. And people did the pure theater of the mind for decades. So that's been disproven. Already broke all kinds of large combat in tons and tons of games through the 70s and 80s. So large combat was done with pure theater of the mind. All that was done over and over again. I'm sorry if guys right now, there's a bunch of guys out there that just failed at running a game, say in the combat zone, using pure theater of the mind. I would only tell them, I'm not trying to insult them because I run that combat, so I know it works when they say it doesn't. And I've seen other people run it for years, so I know it works when they say it doesn't. The problem isn't that they don't work, dude. That pure theater of the mind doesn't work. And I'm not trying to insult you, but the reality is the pure theater of the mind isn't the problem. You are. Like, if everyone else can do it, so it's okay to say you can't do it, but just to come out and say it sucks and it's no good, and they even make social claims, like get on videos or get on panels and say you can't do large scale combat. I'm like, well, dude, how'd they do it for like the last fucking 30 years with tons of people in the old school doing it like breathing air, like I did, and still do. So it's like, how am I still doing it? How did I do it all these years? How did all the other people do it? Which they did. So it's we that was the surplus of DMs that could run large scale combat with pure theater of the mind. That was so commonplace. Again, I told you when I started seeing people use miniatures, it wasn't right away because it would cost so much money. People would bring a miniature like, here's my character, put it down the table, but it was almost no good to really use it. Most people, if they didn't have the chips, if they were using anything, they would, I'm serious, this is so commonplace. No special terrain, always a white sheet of paper, like just some white sheets of paper. So the line to the hallway, okay, this line on this side, this line on this side, and then this little line to go through is the door here. I'll put a little mark down. That's where the table is with the stand, right? Okay, Black Rose, throw it at me. Closet. The closest you get to a role-playing game without the theater of the mind, but only miniatures, is the game Mordheim, which is an awesome miniature game with good RP elements. Well, that sounds like more of a unique game in itself that is, like I was saying D&D, and I totally get you. Other games aren't D&D. So I totally agree, and you can center another game around that. Again, the only thing I do with pure theater of the mind was talk about it's the Dungeons and Dragons gimmick, because that's where it's built around. But I agree with you. There are games out there where you go, man, it's mandatory to use figures in this game. And that's really what you're looking for, a game that makes it mandatory. Because if it's mandatory, the game gets built around that. But if you actually look at the language of old school D&D, you'll just realize it's all optional for the miniatures and everything is explained so you can do everything in the pure theater of the mind. Because it's mandatory for the game to run it in pure theater of the mind. Again, it's optional to lean into the miniatures if you want to, right? And it's something Gary himself gave up using. So even he was doing pure theater of the mind and gave up on miniatures and talked about that openly on Dragon's Foot. And one of the TSR guys posted that on X recently. And I guess some people weren't happy with it, but that's just the truth. It's not wargaming, right? There's nothing wrong with wargaming. So to wargamers out there, we're cool, man. I hope wargamers wouldn't think I have some issue with them because I say D&D is not wargaming. Actually, most wargaming guys I know agree with that. I mean, even today, I talk to real wargamers. Hey, is D&D a wargame? Fuck no. They'll feel, a lot of the guys feel insulted when you say D&D is what they do. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Just because you're using some of the figurines doesn't mean you're playing a war game. Like you're playing with little elves. They'll make fun of it. You'll hear war gamers I knew that just weren't into the D&D gimmick. They do the most classic thing you'd think of. They make fun of the whole thing. They make fun of the vampires when it came out. They made fun of all the D&D stuff. Only a small number of wargamers crossed over and actually joined the D&D hobby. If you actually look at TSR, the majority of its customers are people that never did wargaming. So why do you think most people would never think to use figurines? Like, why are they using paper and the chips on like a wargamer? Because the majority of them have no idea what wargaming is. They could even read things like, this was built off of chainmail. Is it the armor? You don't know how many guys I would tell, like, the game is built on chainmail. You'd be like, what? Like the chainmail I got from my character? Like, what? Huh? Like on chainmail? No, it's a war game, dude. But that's what most people were like coming into the hobby back in the 80s, at least that I was encountering into the 90s. Even on OpenRPG, on a lot of forums, and ask Dragonfoot guys. They ran into it all the time. So I'm definitely not lying to you when I say there's just the majority of people that became D&D people at one point or another were just people that never wargamed. So wargaming language can confuse them unless they learn it over time. So, okay, that non-wargamer knows about chainmail now, 5 years later, but if you met him in year one, he didn't know shit because he's not a wargamer. So everyone did. A lot of people that just didn't know it just did what the book explained. The book makes it mandatory to do it in the head. It makes combat vague in certain terms and gives you basic descriptions so you can understand it. So you can measure things out in basic ranges or how much you can move. You can move 60 yards here. You can move yards on top of the surface. You can move feet when you're below. So it's like 60 feet, not 60 yards or something, right? It's a different measuring once you're inside of a building. So it's not just that you're underground, but you're just inside. So inside is measured feet. In most cases, outside is measured yards, right? Because you're more free to move. But these are basic elements so you can apply this common sense into your mind rather than needing a board. The more rules you apply, in some ways, the more you make the miniature mandatory. My only issue is this. My only criticism of miniatures is this, and I don't say it to make anyone mad. I really believe this. Miniatures is the back door to turning D&D into video games. I think the combat and the imagination is so important in the realism and playing the game there. I do find the miniature thing, I feel like it's a way to create, if you build the game around miniatures, you start building a game rather than a game with a level of realism, simulation, and other aspects all mixed together. I think you start taking away from that. I think if you do too much miniature building, like it's too focused, it becomes like the figurine war game. Like, to me, I don't picture the experience at a tabletop role-playing game being that. It's like, to me, you're playing the character, speak as your character. You're in your mind, in the world. Like, I want to entertain you like you're taking part in the movie. And trust me, if you're someone out there who doesn't understand how powerful your imagination is, just think about this. When you read a book, all it does is use words to get your mind to think. And you know how powerful you can think when you're diving into a book. You can get in that state, that immersed type of state, where you're so immersed into the verbal words being spoken like you are in the book that the imagination is there running. But now you participate in the thing. Now you alter what's going on in your mind. Now you play with it instead of just being told what it is like you would with a book. Yeah. Yeah, I'll put that up. But I would say, that's if you build things around it, it becomes too much. I like the optional. I've always liked it being optional things. Like, I get it. Players can choose to use it, but we shouldn't build the game around it, because I think by building the game around pure theater of the mind, you make it harder for people to turn it into a video game because there's a vagueness that's hard to put into an invisible wall. It's hard to measure it out with a video game in the same way you can with a game more catered to the miniatures. Like, look at 5e. It applies so well to a game that is a turn-based game that where you're using miniatures in the Baldur's Gate 3. Think about it like miniatures, but it's all built around that. And what does it feel like? A video game. When you play 5e, and I ran 5e, it can feel like that. It can like feel more like that than you in the world walking around, right? Or encountering whatever. So now tomorrow, I'm covering the realm Dark Sun. Next Saturday, I'll be doing a thing on the Bro OSR, and it's not really the Bro OSR. I jokingly say that. I'm going to cover the Bronstein, the one-to-one time stuff, and some of the other opinions they have, and just take a look at it, and not outright to criticize, but first, at least find the basic pitch they put out there. I get some stuff already gathered up. Create a thing that I think is just going to at least accurate in the basic details, and I'll put that out there without putting any criticism. So we'll get the details that I can gather up and put together because I'm doing it on my own. I asked some Bro OSR people if they join me. No response, so it's like, okay, I'll bare bone this thing. I'll figure it out. I'll put some real grind work in this week to get that done. But I want to look at it because there's nothing wrong with looking at it. I want to promote it if it's good. I want to tell the truth about it so I don't lie. I don't want to lie about it. Even if I have a negative opinion, I want to tell the truth first and then just say, well, here's what, fair enough. I might not think that's legit, but I'll at least tell you as it is pitched in the world and be honest, right? So I'll try my best to not be accused of being dishonest about what they're saying they do, and we'll go from there. Yeah, that's it. It's an hour and 30 minutes. I hope everyone enjoys tonight. I hope you enjoy checking out the history of the monsters, why they were used, everything else. I don't know if you relate with the early part of the stream. At the start of the stream, I'm sorry, I apologize to anyone who gets to this point. I guess Restream had a bit of a hiccup. I had to refresh the entire thing. It just didn't, I guess nothing was going when I first pressed play into the thing. So you'll notice if you do rewind or get here, there's a bit of a pause. And that's it. That's an hour and a half. All right, Black Rose, yes, cheers. Love y'all. Appreciate it.